Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Tuesday. It is the 15th day of July, 2025, and the stories keep on coming across the wire. And these stories continue to set the stage for what the Bible says our world is going to look like at the time of the end of this present age, before the second coming of Jesus Christ and the many events it predicts that will precede it. So let's have a look at the headlines. First of all, one that's a really odd story. There's a report. This is from a British tabloid. Trump spoke with Zelensky about the possibility of attacking Moscow. Israel National News reported it and passed it on, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Israel bombed Iran. Tehran still refuses to talk about its nuke program. So what's next? Great question. That's from the Jerusalem Post. Now, the U.S. and European allies agree on August deadline for Iran's nuclear deal. This is also from the Jerusalem Post. In other words, if there's not a nuclear deal with Iran that they make with the allies, whether it be the Europeans and the U.S. by August, all right, what's going to happen? Snapback. In other words, the sanctions that were originally given to Iran and were taken away, they're going to be snapped back and Iran will be under sanction. And there's some pretty huge ones. So this is an interesting story. So we'll deal with that too. Israel's Diaspora Affairs Minister, his name is Amichai Chikli. He's actually called for the assassination of Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa. This is from the Israel periodical HaYom. And finally, one that's in the believe it or not, but we certainly can believe it in our day and age. There was a schoolgirl who was banned from diversity day at her school. She's 12 years old. Why? What was her sin? She wore a Union Jack dress. In other words, the British flag when everyone else was wearing burqas and hijabs. And so I guess you can be diverse, but just not diverse in the area of supporting your own country. It's some UK Daily Mail. We'll talk about it. All right, let's look at the headlines. Headline number one, report Trump spoke with Zelensky about the possibility of attacking Moscow. This is from Israel National News. U.S. President asked Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, this on July 4th, supposedly, if Ukraine could hit Moscow and St. Petersburg. This is according to a report published today, Tuesday, in the British Financial Times. The report claims that these remarks were made during a phone call between the two on July 4th, according to two sources familiar with the details. Uh, Trump asked Vladimir, can you hit Moscow? Can you hit St. Petersburg? Zelensky replied, definitely. We could if you give us the weapons. Trump indicated his support for this possibility, explaining that the goal of such a move would be to make the Russians feel the pain and force the Kremlin to enter negotiations. This move makes a sharp departure, of course, the position Trump has previously presented, in which he has committed to ending the war quickly and reducing the U.S. involvement in international conflicts. However, it remains unclear whether Washington will provide Kiev with long-range weapons, such as Tomahawk missiles capable of hitting targets deep inside Russia. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded to the reports, saying there were serious statements that need to be examined. He clarified that Russia does not accept ultimatums. Deputy Foreign Minister Rybakov emphasized that Moscow is open to dialogue, but not under threats. So we'll see where this one goes. Interesting story. So again, stay tuned for to follow up on that one. All right. Another one we got to stay tuned also to from the Jerusalem Post. Israel bombed Iran. Tehran still refuses to talk about its nuke program. So what next? Great question. 3 weeks after the Israel-Iran war ended, Khamenei expelled the IAEA, that's the International Atomic Energy Association inspectors. He refused U.S. nuclear talks and appears undecided on reconstituting nuclear and missile programs. He's not undecided at all. They're definitely going to go forward there. From June 13th to 24th, Israel devastated Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missile program, its anti-aircraft defenses, top military and nuclear chiefs, and symbols of the IRGC and Basij military oppressive rule. But after all of that to date, there has been zero progress to set future limits on Iran's nuclear or ballistic missile programs. There was hope that after setting back Tehran's nuclear program by a number of years and harming its ballistic missile program substantially, that the Ayatollahs would finally sign a tougher nuclear deal that would really keep them away from nuclear weapons. There was a stretch to hope that the Islamic Republic would even modify its ballistic missile program to stop adding missiles that could reach Israel, settling for medium-range missiles. 3 weeks after the Iran-Israel war ended, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei expelled the IAEA from his country, refused to talk with the U.S. about his nuclear program, but also seems, again, like they said, undecided about whether he'll push forward to reconstitute the programs. On Tuesday, Iran was expected to hold meetings with Russia and China to better size up both how much these countries are willing to help Khamenei. And the laundry list is long. Iran wants to build its nuclear program, is the next heading here in this article. Iran wants their help to rebuild what it has lost in the nuclear and ballistic missile arenas, as well as help them rebuild its anti-aircraft defense system and possibly provide new offensive weapons like more advanced aircraft. But to date, the Islamic Republic has been thoroughly disappointed with its big brothers who stayed completely out of the war. And in recent days, reports leaked that Russian President Vladimir Putin told Khamenei that he should accept a new nuclear deal without enrichment. While Kremlin spokesperson deplored the report as defamation, they also notably did not deny its substance. And since the war, Putin himself has not backed Iran's position publicly of continuing to enrich uranium. The Jerusalem Post has also been told in the past by a wide variety of sources in multiple countries that neither Russia nor China wants Iran to get a nuclear weapon. The rationale is that they only support Tehran on a transactional basis when convenient, but they are fearful of what the messianic ayatollahs might do with nuclear weapons, as they should be, because if they got the weapons, the messianic ayatollahs would indeed bomb whoever they could, basically Western civilization. So their final Mahdi would come the 12th Imam. And remember, that's the one in the 9th century, the last of 12 that in succession that disappeared, supposedly went in some cave somewhere, and there he's waiting to come out in the last days when Iran basically blasts the entire world to smithereens. So anyway, that's the problem. That's what Iran is wanting and expecting to do. And so the article goes on to say, so if Iran is still sorting out its game plan as it talks with its allies and sorts through the rubble of its once proud nuclear facilities to see how bad things are, what are all the other key parties' game plan while Iran stonewalls? In the worst case, with no IAEA inspectors in the country, it's easier for Khamenei to secretly move many different key aspects of Iran's nuclear program to new concealed locations in order to try and sneak out quietly to a nuclear weapon. At most, Iran seems ready to allow a limited return of IAEA inspectors, but again, and here's the key, but not to any of the sensitive nuclear sites regarding which the world wants supposed to see the status of. In some ways, Israel is the party that is most in the driver's seat. The imminent threat of a nuclear war, has been removed by military force, and Iran has zero defenses now, and probably for a period of several months, if not longer. And so in the near term, Israel could attack again if it sees Iran doing something that it does not like. Note the recent Defense Ministry announcement that Israeli satellites took tens of millions of photos of Iran leading up to and during the war. All right, we would not be surprised if this happened if Israel decided to strike again. But again, just like the situation with Russia and Ukraine, here with Iran and Israel, we just don't know what's going to happen. So we'll have to stay tuned. But again, a lot of saber rattling here across the line, isn't there, on both sides? All right, headline number 3. U.S. European allies agree on August deadline for Iran nuclear deal. This is from the Jerusalem Post. If Iran and the U.S. cannot reach a deal by August, Germany, France, and the U.K. will reimpose UNSC sanctions that were lifted under the 2015 Iran deal. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and the UK agreed on a phone call on Monday to set the end of August as the de facto deadline for reaching a nuclear deal with Iran. This is a report from Axios citing 3 sources. If no deal is reached by this deadline, the 3 European powers plan to trigger the snapback mechanism that automatically reimposes all UN Security Council sanctions that were lifted under the 2015 nuclear deal some 10 years ago, according to the Axios report. Now, we talked the other day about Iran's response to this. Basically, they've threatened the European countries. You will pay dearly, don't you do this, we will respond in kind. And remember, they have ballistic missiles that can reach Europe. But they certainly can. So would they use them? Well, again, who knows? But the threat is always there. So again, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, with this one comes from Israel. Headline 4, by the way, of Israel, HaYom. The Diaspora Affairs Minister, Amichai Chikli, has called for the assassination of the Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa. Okay, this is amidst the ongoing Israeli strikes targeting the regime in Syria. Diaspora Affairs Minister Chikli on Tuesday called for the elimination of Syrian President al-Sharaa amidst ongoing Israeli strikes as they're targeting the regime in Syria. His statement comes even as diplomatic efforts continue to promote a potential security agreement between the two countries. That's what's odd. They're trying to get an agreement, whether it be a security one, between Israel and Syria. If it looks like Hamas, talks like Hamas, and acts like Hamas, it is Hamas, Chikli declared. He's absolutely right, by the way, of this. We must not stand idly by in the face of the Islamist Nazi terror regime of al-Qaeda in a suit and tie. Anyone who thinks Ahmed al-Sharaa is a legitimate leader is gravely mistaken. He is a terrorist, a barbaric murderer who should be eliminated without delay. We saw the horrified massacre of the Alawites, met with deafening silence from the European leaders, and now we're witnessing the slaughter and humiliation of the Druze. The terror regime in Syria must be fought. The next heading in this article is Trump's new friend. In recent days, Israel has carried out multiple airstrikes in southwestern Syria following the movement of regime tanks towards Sweda, home to the country's largest Druze population. Despite the military escalation, there have been increasing reports of a budding security agreement between Israel and Syria, potentially as part of the Abraham Accords framework. President Donald Trump, interesting, here we go again. Former President Donald Trump in the article. It's President Donald Trump, you guys. U.S. President Donald Trump, during a landmark meeting with al-Sharaa in May, reportedly urged him to join the accords. Trump also removed Syria from the list, a U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. Additionally, recent reports indicate the meetings between senior Israeli and Syrian officials in Azerbaijan. Syrian media claimed last week that the National Security Council head Shachi Hanegbi met with al-Sharaa in the United Arab Emirates. While this meeting has not been officially confirmed, Israel HaYom revealed the dialogue with the Syrian regime is indeed ongoing. So here you got two things going on. You've got the diaspora minister calling for the assassination of this terrorist leader. In other words, he's Al Qaeda in a suit, as it were. He's just dressed up, but he's still the murderous, barbarous murderer he's always been. And yet, on the other hand, they're trying to put some type of security arrangement in place between the two countries, between Israel and Syria, who have been at loggerheads, forever and a day. And so again, we'll see what happens here. It's interesting what's taking place. But a number of people have said, like Chikli, that why in the world would you trust this person, al-Sharaa, who's a terrorist through and through? He's been one his whole life. He's just dressed up in an Armani suit now, but he's still the same evil character he's always been. So again, we'll keep our eyes on this one. Now, totally changing the subject, this from the UK Daily Mail will conclude with story number 5. Schoolgirl is banned from diversity for wearing a Union Jack dress. We're not making this up. A schoolgirl was put in isolation for wearing a Union Jack dress to celebrate being British at her school's Culture Day. Union Jack, by the way, is another name for you out there that are not sure of this, the British flag. All right. She was put into isolation for wearing a Union Jack dress to celebrate being British at her school's Culture Day. Straight A student Courtney Wright, age 12, wore the Spice Girls-esque dress and wrote a speech about history and traditions as part of the celebrations on Friday. But the year 7 pupil was told the dress wasn't acceptable before being hauled out of lessons and made to sit in reception until her father collected her. Stewart Field, 47, said he was gobsmacked to learn that he had been segregated from her peers due to her choice of attire at Bilton School in Rugby, Warwickshire. He added that while other pupils with St. George and Welsh flags were also turned away, students were allowed in burqas, niqabs, and traditional Nigerian clothing. In other words, Muslim clothing, traditional Nigerian clothing. That's fine. You just can't look British in Britain, I guess, for this day. Mr. Field, who works in marine restoration, said Courtney was so embarrassed and couldn't understand what she'd done wrong. She should not be made to feel embarrassed about being British, and she shouldn't be published for celebrating British culture and history. Nobody else I've spoken to can quite get their heads around it. No kidding. And so that's the story. Welcome to the new world of diversity, so long as your diversity doesn't include celebrating the country you're in its present form. They're all for diversity, and that is as long as you want to tear down where the UK, the United States, whatever country it might be, and replace it with this new woke culture, the diversity that basically accepts everybody except the ones who have the traditional views. All right, the headlines again today are supportive of what we should expect to see from the predictions of Scripture with respect to the time of the end. They just keep on coming day after day, and we'll keep reporting them. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.